Mr. and Mrs. Dan Quigg, Dan and Debbie Quigg, parents of graduating senior Bethany Quigg, and Mrs. Quigg is actually going to come forward at this time to present for the first time the Glenn L. Pringle Memorial Scholarship, and I'll let her tell you about that and then award the scholarship. Would you welcome Mrs. Quigg?
Sorry, it's tough to get old. Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, everybody. I'm just going to ask a few minutes of your time. You know, how do you distill the essence of a life down to a 2 to 4 minute talk? That was what I was confronted with when I knew I was going to be up here and given the opportunity to talk about my grandfather, Glenn L. Pringle. None of you, with the exception of my daughter Bethany, will ever know my grandpa. He will just be the name on a scholarship here at CVCA. So this is my time to give you the essence of the man that I knew, who he was, and why we are endowing a scholarship in his name. My grandpa was born in 1907 in Iowa, the second of 5 children, 4 of them very active boys. I won't bore you with the tales of his childhood and growing up years, but suffice it to say that he was not one who passed up mischief if it came knocking on his door. Grandpa loved to tell the story about how he and his older brother Gerald had the great idea to catch a skunk. I don't know what they were going to do with it once they caught it, but they had careful placement of the trap and the fact that, you know, they did catch the skunk, but the skunk got them first. He was a very hard-working young man, always looking for a way to make money to add to the family coffers and to put in the bank because he knew he wanted to get an education. He wanted to be a teacher. Grandpa valued his education because he had to work so hard to achieve it. All of his money was lost in a bank failure during the Depression, and so in order to go to college, he had to work his way through, waiting tables, doing dishes, any job that presented itself, Grandpa would do. In fact, waiting on tables was how he met my grandmother. He was her waiter. He knew the value, but he saw her and he said that was it. He knew the value of an education and he wanted others to know that as well. As a young elementary school principal in Iowa in 1938, he noticed that his students were coming to school disheveled, dirty, and he felt underfed. Typical of Grandpa, he set out to see what he could do. He didn't delegate the authority, he just went and visited the families of these students himself, and he realized that many of these families didn't have the resources to feed and clothe their children properly. So he decided that he was going to start a free lunch program. He went to everyone he could think of to raise the supplies that he needed to see that this idea was achieved. He saw a need, and he worked to make sure that these young men and women were helped. That was the essence of my grandfather. He saw a need, and he did everything that he could to help, quietly, without calling attention to himself. Grandpa was all about education, whether it was being the principal of a small Iowa school, being the headmaster of a large Christian academy in Florida, being the head of student teaching at Wheaton College, or just showing me what to do in the garden. He was all about education. He was also the only man I ever saw who gardened in a shirt and tie. He was also the only man I've ever seen who was quiet enough and sneaky enough to get up behind a wild rabbit, reach down, grab his ears, turn around, and present it to my brother as a pet. Let me tell you, wild rabbits do not make good pets. That's all I can tell you. He was always there with a joke or a pun to tell you, and when he was done, he would just laugh and laugh. Laughter for Grandpa was a gift from the Lord, and he worked to share it with everyone he knew. Grandpa loved education, but he also loved his Jesus and wanted all the young men and women he taught to know Jesus too. He gave up that Iowa principal's job because his boss came to him and said he could not start each day by reading a Bible verse over the loudspeaker. Grandpa responded by saying that he would rather give up the job than be prevented from sharing what was most important to him. Grandpa was a faithful son who wrote his mother every day from the time he left for college in the 1920s to the day that my great-grandmother died at the age of 98 in 1985. Every day. He wrote faithfully to his children and to his grandchildren, sending us articles on things that he knew we were excited about, sending us seeds for our garden, and occasionally sending us a single stick of gum, because Grandpa was never without his gum. Grandpa collected young people. That sounds sort of like a funny phrase, but that was what he did. He was always on the lookout for young people that he could help, and he was always willing to provide that help if he could. In 1955, his college colleague, Adele Mortensen, asked if Grandpa would give her 18-year-old grandson a job for the summer. Grandpa says, "Sure, he can come with me. He can work with me in the camp kitchen I'm setting up in New York City." Well, that young man was my father, Don Amsler. And that summer, Grandpa worked him hard, but he also made sure that my father met his daughter, Gina. And I'm very glad he did, because that was my parents. Whenever Grandpa helped someone, he made sure that he talked to them about Jesus. He never missed an opportunity to tell others about Christ. He felt that he was blessed beyond measure, and that with those blessings came responsibility and the pleasure of telling others about Christ. When Grandpa went home to be with his Lord, we were met by a steady stream of people at his memorial. People who came up to us and said almost exactly the same thing. They would come up, they would lean close, they would shake our hands, and they would say, "You don't know me, but your grandfather helped me when I needed it most." Glenn Loren Pringle was a man who displayed a quiet Christian character with a servant's heart. He loved his family, he loved his students, and he loved his Jesus. That is what we are looking to honor with this scholarship, someone who displays a quiet Christian character, a love of learning, and a servant's heart. And so I'm pleased to announce that returning senior Jimmy Cooper is the first recipient of the Glenn L. Pringle Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $3,000.